It's Wizards versus Lesbians, a podcast for your ears. Hello and welcome to Wizards versus Lesbians. My name is Isaac.
I'm Alexis.
And today we're discussing a Master of Djinn by P. Jelly Clark. Plot summary, Alexis or me first?
You first.
Alrighty. So this book takes place in steampunk Cairo. Actual Cairo, not fantasy Cairo. But in an alternate timeline when a mystic called, oh my god, I've forgotten what he's called. Aljahiz, Isaac.
I've read like 6 books since I last read this one. Since I read this one, so I've forgotten everybody's name. Sorry.
A mystic known as the Bug-Eyed in Arabic figured out a way to open a portal to the world of the Djinn, who are real in this scenario, and that has allowed Egypt to throw off the colonial yoke of England, and also has allowed most of England's other colonial
it has allowed
other colonies to
not just England. It has allowed most of the colonized world to either actively throw off or be in the process of throwing off the colonial yoke.
Yes. The European powers are in disarray, but that is not stopping us from ramping up to World War I in the same way that we did in our timeline. In this world, Fatima is a agent of the Egyptian Ministry for the Corralling of Supernatural Entities. That's not exactly what it's called, but close enough. Her job and her agency's job is to take care of crimes committed by jinn, mad scientists, angels, etc. And she is called in to investigate a case in which 18 Englishmen and 2 Egyptians are murdered by being burned alive, but their clothes were left intact by a mysterious masked man. And she must track down this masked man and find out his true identity with the help of her new greenhorn partner, who must earn her respect, and her sinuous lesbian lover, who is a follower of the old Egyptian gods, an idolater, and who may be hiding secrets of her own. And with a cast of sort of wacky characters from the era, including the actual Kaiser Wilhelm and Poincaré. And eventually she solves the crime and prevents the apocalypse.
Yeah.
Sound good?
Yeah. That's a pretty reasonable summary.
Alrighty. We got lesbians, we got wizards, certainly. They're definitely in conflict also.
Yeah.
So certainly qualifies as a Wizards versus Lesbians book in a number of respects. Why should you read this book, Alexis?
Why should you read this book? If you like murder mysteries, then this one really has a lot of the, except for the fact that it doesn't wrap up when they solve the mystery. There's still another like 1/5 of the book to go. But other than that, it very much has the pacing and tone of a murder mystery. So if you like that, if the setting is appealing to you, then if, you want to see a very dapper lesbian magical FBI person wandering around steampunk Cairo, if you want to see a bunch of colonial racists get burned alive,
you can just read the first 10 pages and have that taken care of.
Then yes, then you'll definitely enjoy the opening. I certainly did not dislike this book nearly as much as you did. I thought it was, reasonably entertaining.
Spoilers.
We are spoiler positive here at Wizards versus Lesbians.
Even spoiling our own podcast.
And I thought it was, a perfectly entertaining magical murder mystery that was just too long and kind of silly. But for a lot of people, I think the setting, the characters, just a mystery. are going to be. I mean, it's a real obvious mystery, but that's fine. You don't read murder mysteries to figure out who did it.
Right. It hits a lot of standard murder mystery beats. I would say that the reason that it keeps going after the mystery is solved is because the actual structure of the book is out of the action movie handbook, like the literal handbook, the one with the rising action.
It really is.
The 3 acts and all that stuff.
That's very true.
And so it goes on, as most of these movies do, about a fifth longer than it should. And I would say that why you should read it, if you're going to want to turn your brain all the way off. But if you do that, I think you can have a good time with it. And I would say that some of the jokes are good. Not all of them land for me, but I must admit that some of them made me chuckle. So that's good. Yeah, no, this is like a beach book. It's like turn off your brain, have some fun with it.
Yeah.
Kind of a book.
Yeah, I think it's very much that. And if you want that, but like with,
and it's got lesbians and diversity
with a Muslim Egyptian lesbian, then sure, why not?
Yeah. As to why you shouldn't read this book,
it's too long.
I didn't even think this one was too long. I just thought it was stupid. Like, there's like the murder mystery where the mystery, how the mystery turns out, before the characters. Like the ideal point is that you figure out before the characters do, but not too long before the characters do.
Right. And this one,
I figured it out earlier than halfway through the book.
Yeah, I figured it out the second time the murderer appears.
Yep.
Just going, and not even because of any clues, just because the way that plots work these days, and the way that and fan expectations, it was just blisteringly obvious.
Yeah, no, it couldn't be the extremely obvious one, so it had to be the slightly less obvious one, which it was in itself extremely obvious.
Right, and other things also after that we can discuss after the spoiler zone.
Exactly. Content warnings. I don't know if you agree that there's anti-Semitic dog whistles in this book. But we can discuss that after the spoiler zone. I think there are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm interested to hear what you think, because I had mixed feelings about that.
Yes, but regardless, so but in terms of actual content warnings, possession, actually pretty sort of standard Wizards versus Lesbians content warnings, although no sexual assault in this one, or even intimations of sexual assault. The general tone is too light for that. This is a comedy, more or less.
Yeah.
But people die horribly, and there are huge, like blockbuster movie style, city blocks getting destroyed kind of events, which leave named characters alive.
Yeah. No. There's there's a fair amount of violence. There's possession. There's mind control.
Yep.
That's about it.
But that's about it. And off to the spoiler zone we shall go, perhaps?
Off to the spoiler zone we shall go.
Cool. As we head off to the spoiler zone, I must apologize for the lack of jingles in this episode. We engage in a lot of discourse here, which I don't want to undermine with my patented light and airy jingle tone. I did put in a few, I just can't help myself, but I edited the least tasteful ones of them out. So I want to start with the stuff that I liked.
Okay.
It is always fun to have British men be mocked. I mean,
yes.
There's a certain fair's fair, because I don't know about you, but when I read this, I was like, oh, this is like a Terry Pratchett book, like in certain ways, in terms of both the setting and the kind of we're solving our problems through a combination of how do you want to put it, magical sort of chess and, argumentation of very basic political ideas.
You know what it reminded me of?
What?
Neverwhere.
Ooh, that's that's significantly more damning. I should say that this is
I know, right?
it's not as good as Pratchett, I should point out, and largely because it's not nearly as funny.
Or as thoughtful. The politics are really basic. And the scenes, well, I said I was going to start with what I liked about them, and I'm already getting mixed up. But the world is fun. Like, it's there's a lot of fun little set pieces. There's a lot of fun. There's some good visual world building. It feels like a fun sort of adventure to hang out in, and it's very cinematic in a lot of ways. Like, you really does capture the feeling of watching an action movie.
Oh yeah,
make a good mystery action movie.
I think it was written specifically with making it into a movie in mind. It would fit very neatly.
It would, yeah. It would, and I thought that is, I think, a better medium for it. But Fatma's suits, there's lots of little fun.
Yeah, a lot of attention is paid to
visuals,
to the
details.
Yeah, I like the color. Really good use of color here. You could picture everything very well, much like what was the one that felt like an anime that we read? Was that the Midnight Lie?
No.
Foundry Side?
It was. Yeah, Foundry Side.
Yeah. This actually reminded me of Foundry Side in a couple of different ways.
You're right. No, it definitely kind of has that. It has that sort of action. I mean, where Foundry Side really felt more like watching an anime, this felt more like watching, a Western action movie. But it definitely had that combination of very good visuals, but plot that doesn't quite hang together and drags on too long because you're too busy, narrating how the camera's panning, basically.
And as a result, all of my favorite things from this book are essentially little moments, because sort of that's. And I think that when you're trying to sell an action movie, or when you're, trying to design sort of a spectacle like this, that's what you're looking for. Is the bits and pieces that become like gifs or stick in the audience's mind, and that become like little word of mouth runners. The basket full of tongues, I thought, was one of those touches that was a really great little image.
Yeah.
God, there are a bunch of other little things.
I felt like Ahmed's slow transformation into a crocodile man.
Oh, Ahmed was one of my favorite parts. I mean,
he's great.
I'm also a sucker for the schmuck gets to do the heroic act at the end thing. And so I enjoyed that. But I guess sort of like the issue is, I'm a sucker for that thing, and this book is just a collection of tropes, right?
Yes, and when it's tropes that you like, it's a lot of fun, and when it's tropes that you feel that you are just extremely over, then it's very eye-rolling.
Except by the end of it, right? It's like by the end of it, I was so done with it that when City showed up on the motorcycle, it's like I could see that, in another book, or if I was not as, 110% done with this book as I was by that time, I could have, found that hilarious in a sort of the car pulling up to the dueling arena in Utena kind of a way. But as it was here, I was just like, oh, just shut up.
See, and I feel like this is one of those appreciable differences between the audiobook experience and the reading a book experience, at least if you read fairly quickly. Because, if I'd had to listen to however many hours this was, I would have been extremely over it by then.
Right.
But instead, I was more like, well, this book should have ended half an hour or an hour of reading ago. But, great. Yes. CD should show up on a motorcycle. Awesome.
There were some charms to the audiobook. The performer really, gave it her all. just sort of went over the top with pretty much everything, which is what you would expect. And there was actually a few things in this book which made me think, well, I don't like this, but surely turnabout is fair play, right? Like the narrator has of the audiobook had like the absolute dog worst British accents you've ever heard. And I'm like, yeah, no, I'm totally here for that. Like, I'm sure that there's been 1.5 million equally naff, sort of Middle Eastern in quotes accents, in similar situations. And, I thought of Terry Pratchett and Clatch and the various ways in which, sort of he dealt with the cartoon Middle East in some of his less good books. And, I'm like, all right, that part doesn't bother me at all. It's just the density of the tropiness was really sort of the thing. And yeah, no, when you were having to go through it word by word and you can't just scroll, sort of skim through the bits where you already know what's going on. I really did enjoy, I mentioned this already, but I really did enjoy Kaiser Wilhelm and his goblin.
Yes.
I found that really cute. So there are a lot of and actually that one gets me into like the first idea that I want to discuss that the book puts forward.
Okay.
From this point, I complained for about 15 entire minutes, which technically makes this the grumpy zone. So this is not unlike the Unbroken in the way that it treats magic. Although I think it has one.
Yes.
It has one up on the Unbroken, and this one like acknowledges that Islam is a thing. And in fact, it's like one of the central things in this book. And I think one of the best parts of the book is the way that Islam interacts and sort of coexists with like Coptic Christians and, but more particularly the idolaters / worshippers of the old gods in Cairo. Which that felt rich and well observed. But it in sort of exactly the same way as the Unbroken, the sort of the thing here seems to be that the culture, magic equals native culture, right? Native in quotes. The book goes out of its way to be annoyed at the word native, which again I have no problem with.
Right, but magic equals culture.
Yeah. And one of the big tensions of the book is the idea that the reason that, in our world, Egypt was not able to sort of throw off the oppressor, the colonizer, until significantly later, is that it was not given the use of its own history. Like there's this idea that, the first of all, the very well observed order of Al-Jahiz, it was Al-Jahiz, it turns out, with its like, another thing that I liked about the book, the hilariously overdetermined pile of symbols that the Lord Worthington put together for his emblem and all of that stuff. That's great.
Yes.
That it's the English sort of co-opting this power that is like
trying to
that is the and not understanding what it is they're fucking with by doing so. That's sort of the villain of the piece. And once again, and in the Unbroken, I was like, well, I don't think this idea holds up. And you can sort of see in how it plays out in this book a number of the reasons why I don't think that idea holds up. In large part just because there's this like one-to-one correlation between like self-actualization and sort of knowing your roots and power, that's like very popular in sort of a multiculturalist sort of liberal view, And this book also felt like super 100% multiculturalist, culturalist liberal, you know, in like big letters, right? But there's a missing piece to that, which is that the bigger army wins usually, in where these things are concerned. As the wizard of this podcast, I'd just like to point out there's a limit to how far magic will get you. There's a whole lot that magic can do, but it will not win a war for you. You can change some hearts and minds, but you can't stop guns. Should I talk about the angels now, or should we save that for later?
Let's talk about let's talk about the angels.
Right. So the MacGuffin of this book is Solomon's Seal, which, speaking of Neil Gaiman, he wrote a short comic about in The Sandman. You know, a British man acquiring this culture and writing a story about it in the fine tradition of many British storytellers. But Solomon's Seal is the power that lets somebody who is pure of heart control Djinn, who are, and again, this book is much better than some of the other ones we did about actually saying, oh, okay, so there are these sentient monsters, but we're going to actually have to treat them like they're sentient beings with rights, which is also, again, very Pratchett in his, you know, dwarves and trolls and all of this.
Yeah.
The issue being that that nobody can remember that the Seal of Solomon or Solomon's Ring, or and when I'm saying Solomon, I mean Suleiman, incidentally,
yes,
exists, because the angels and the Djinn made a pact, and weaved an enormous magic which makes all humans immediately forget about the existence of the seal, and makes Djinns physically unable to speak about it.
Yes.
So, it turns out that the angels, and when we're talking about angels, we're talking about these clockwork beings whose very presence clouds men's minds and confuses them and fills them with awe, and makes them unable to think clearly. These angels are decided to leak the knowledge of the Seal of Solomon, essentially, and allow it to be stolen from their vaults by manipulating various people for ends which are nowhere explained, I should point out.
Yes. I think, I mean, it's possible that some of this is alluded to in there's the short story that keeps getting referenced that I have not read.
Right, with the angel maker.
With the rogue angel. But yes, it is not explained anywhere in the book. And I also don't know if it was explained anywhere else.
Right. So we got these beings who are sort of living among the peoples of this world, but who consider themselves above them and have technology that's like far above what they can do. But they love paperwork. They love legislation. They're a bunch of lawyers. They can cloud people's minds, make them forget about their own culture, and are the true hands behind the book's villain, who is an Islamic terrorist.
Well, the book's villains...
we think, I mean, that was the intention when they were setting this up, is to create an Islamic terrorist to essentially, you know, destabilize the region. This works, and they did this incidentally by colluding with the British.
Yes.
In the 1910s and 12s. And so I was thinking, well, how does this line up with the history that we're dealing with here? The book, I should mention, does mention Jews.
Well, it has a cameo with. It's interesting. It mentions Jews in New York.
Yes.
And then there's a cameo which to me felt equal parts charming and tokenistic and even though they never actually use the word Jews around them, the couple, the bookseller who's a Karaite Jew, and his wife who's Ethiopian Beta Israel Jew.
Right. Who are incidentally the cat's paws of the angels.
Yes.
Yes.
Also that. Mm-hmm. But which it did feel a little bit like we're going to pick two Jews who are very much not at all what people think of when they think of Jews, and we're going to make them a married couple, even though their traditions are like completely different.
Yes.
And but that's fine. They're charming, but it felt a little bit like the way that people try to shoehorn in diversity when they don't actually quite know what they're talking about.
Yes. And so it's like, I don't know if the idea of these like aloof, powerful beings who just love paperwork and who can change the culture and make people forget about their history in the Middle East. I don't know if this is all just like unconscious stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely did also. I don't think it was deliberate.
Right.
I do not think that there would have been the happy token Jews of color couple if this had been like deliberate anti-Semitism.
Yeah, but it seemed a little bit unreconstructed, particularly when the
it
power
give me
that they
vibe,
enabled then goes on to kill a building who had a brain, and so the death of the building is like a trauma, and it's a tower. Like my major, like at the end of the day, my major problem with this book is that like you don't get a get out of jail free card for your tropey unconsidered bullshit by adding diversity to it. That's my contention. In the same way that you don't get a get out of jail free card for gender politics by putting lesbians in your book. Because this book's approach to gender is like incredibly unreconstructed also. Like the women are all the time going around being like, oh, these men are so stupid and incompetent and I have to clean up all their messes. They're fucking sitcom wives, and like the sort of the purity test that Fatma has to pass at the end of the book, where it's like, only somebody pure of heart can wield the One Ring here, which incidentally looks just like the One Ring at the beginning, is like, okay, we're going to tempt you with power. She's 9% power. We're going to tempt you with this. Oh, we're going to tempt you with your woman, who you are not, who, you may or may not be able to control, and who you don't know, the real her, because we had this incredibly labored and overdetermined metaphor about a pair of twins to explain that sometimes people lead double lives and have double consciousnesses. But no, she passes that purity test, and I bet she wouldn't have passed that purity test if she'd been a guy. Like, and maybe that's not fair, because like
I think that's a little bit of a stretch. I mean, I think there's an interesting thing where basically everybody who is competent and active in this book is female on both sides.
Yep.
Like the men are just completely useless, except for somewhat creepy Ahmed the schmuck, who's a creep and a weirdo. And gets his like moment of redemption.
Little Kadraki moment there.
Yes, but like the main character who does most of the stuff is a woman. Her rookie sidekick is a woman. Her girlfriend, obviously, and so is the villain.
Yeah,
and I think that's.
I mean, the men are generally like well-meaning and officious, but either they're nerds, or not particularly efficacious in other ways, or just complete idiots. Right.
And I mean,
it's a liberal view of the world which seems about 10 years out of date, as is the view of the police in this book. and the view of governance and the sort of, oh, we elites must take on the burden of the secret knowledge of the world that the common men couldn't understand, which is a take that Fatima has and is not challenged about. And the contempt for the commons that this book has, with like the scene which made me like be, oh no, was the first crowd scene where Al-Jahiz is speaking, where he is. Have you ever seen the episode of The Simpsons where the PTA goes on strike, or the teachers go on strike?
No.
There's a.
Our demands are simple: a small cost of living increase and some better equipment and supplies for your children.
Oh, that's reasonable. Give it to him.
Yeah, in a dream world, we have a very tight budget to do what she's asking. We'd have to raise taxes.
Raise way too high as they are now. Taxes are bad.
It's your children's future.
Oh, yeah, children are important. Yes.
It'll cost you.
Yeah. Oh, the taxes. Right. Raise taxes.
Come on.
All right, that's a good point. Yes. Oh, yeah, the taxes. The finger thing means the taxes.
Well, I guess this is a case where we'll have to agree to disagree.
I don't agree to that.
Neither do I.
And that's the level of political sophistication on display in the crowd scene, where Al-Jahiz is trying to, whip up the frenzy of the masses. It's openly contemptuous.
Well, and that is actually, now to be fair, that is actually a way in which it is kind of like Terry Pratchett.
It is, 100%. Like, I'm not denying that at all. I'm just saying that, there were certain things that Sir Terry never quite got, right, even though he improved over his life. And at least he was funnier about it. I don't think that, I don't think that we were this book is aware that bit is a bit, if you see what I mean. Because it does do bits intentionally that are funny, and that wasn't one of them. But my point more, my overall point is that this feels like it feels like the values and the morals put forward seem like TV morals, TV values. And like, there's nothing wrong with that. That's the culture. It's just so disappointing to me, because I will tell you, here's the thing at the end of the day, and you may disagree with me about this. This feels cynical. This book feels cynical to me. This all feels really calculated. It feels like these are very straightforward politics, very clear things, very like straightforward storytelling. Like this could slip right into a movie. We're trying for like a big multi-volume series here. And we're not going to do anything that's too difficult to understand or that might upset anybody. We're going to shoot right down the middle of the SF buying, polity.
See, I don't think it did not read to me as cynical. What it read to me as, you get this sort of debate back and forth in specfic right now, and we have for like years, of between people who want who want their fiction about marginalized groups to be inherently revolutionary, and people who want their fiction about marginalized groups to be all the fun stuff that, the people, and all the fun stuff that white people get, all the fun stuff that straight people get, all the fun stuff, whatever, but with us.
Yeah, you've put your finger directly on it there. Because I don't think any of that stuff is fun. And I think that one of the best things about marginal literature and literature that, talks about revolutionary themes is that it doesn't have to be like that. And if you're outside the mainstream, you don't have to knock trying to get in. I'm not going to tell this author that he shouldn't try to get rich with this shit.
Well, it's not even just that. I will note, you've always had the choice of rejecting this stuff.
No, I'm 100% aware of that. All I can share is my perspective, though, which is that this
right. But do we actually feel like? And there's another book I want us to do in a few weeks that really is going to be about this debate. So maybe we can save some of that for that. But do we want to insist that, stuff about like, do we want to insist that every book involving queer desire should actually be revolutionary?
No, 100% not.
I mean, to some degree, it's, well, I did make you read this. Or,
yes, you did.
I put it on the list. I mean, I put it on the list. You're always allowed to bow out of these things. But, and so it's a little bit different. But, I mean, so, like, I've read a fair amount of murder mysteries because my mom was really into them. And, like, this is honestly, this is better and less cynical than a lot of them.
I'm sure that's true.
And I honestly think that this is somebody who wanted, the author's dead. So I'm not going to say, that what the author did or didn't want, but I think that this was written to be a fun murder mystery, a fun steampunky murder mystery that gives you steampunk, but not, like, by steampunk standards, this is still really progressive.
Oh, 100%, yeah.
Which is depressing.
The underlying issue here is surprisingly perfectly clear. Is it cringe? Is steampunk cringe? No matter how hard you try to make it woke, you can't fix what is irredeemably broke. It is cringe. Oh, yes, it is cringe. It's cringe.
I mean, there is actually, this isn't the only piece of, like, progressive, multicultural, anti-imperialist steampunk out there. But
I know it name-checked a story from the 1001 Nights called The City of Brass, and I know there's a book called The City of Brass, which I have had on my shelf forever and have never read.
Yeah, that one's not, I don't think, particularly steampunky. That one's a little bit older.
Okay.
I said a little bit earlier. But, like, the point is, I think that things can be tropey fun. Personally, I just would like if stuff is going to be tropey fun for it to be shorter. Because if I'm totally happy to invest like 2 hours in, to like a tropey fun romp through steampunk Cairo. It is a little disappointing when I'm investing like 5 hours in that.
Yeah.
But I don't feel like this is a cynical play for what do the masses want? What's the zeitgeist? I think this is in line with the zeitgeist because the author's in line with the zeitgeist, and the author's, and this is just supposed to be fun, and it is supposed to be, and, the progressive parts about it are supposed to be that it is providing fun for people who don't get to see themselves in nearly as much fun tropey stuff.
Sure. I mean, I will say that on that front, I think that the book is largely successful, although once again, I would have preferred some of the symbology in it to be a little bit better considered.
I agree.
And also, like, just because you're doing dumb fun doesn't mean it has to be
quite this
dumb. Like, and also, I mean, the thing, like, they're also just basic things. Like, the author is clearly of the you should never say said school of writing, and keeps using the word and kept using the word so and so quipped when there was no joke. And like, I interrupt this sentence to warn you that I'm about to say reifying the zeitgeist. There's like being part of the zeitgeist, and then there's reifying the zeitgeist, right? I think and
I think this one does really reify the zeitgeist.
I think that you have a certain responsibility to question the stuff that you're regurgitating. Like, even if you are going to be like, well, okay, that's fine. And like, this book does do that up to a point. Like, the book goes out of its way to mention, but there is colorism in this culture. There is sexism in this culture. There is inequality in this culture. We're not glorifying the non-white culture. We're not going there, but we're also definitely the moral of the story is definitely the same moral of the story that you would get in any action movie, which is basically, oh, there are problems, but Mr. Terrorist doesn't get to blow things up. And
so sorry, finish what you're going to say.
Well, I'm not saying that's not a good moral. I should just point that out. But
that wasn't my point.
But the book really goes hard on that, to the point where it's like Fatma has to morally agonize over whether she's going to shoot the person who is about to literally end the world or not. Mm-hmm. Which was just so unutterably tedious. But
yes.
But yeah, what was the point you were going to make? I'm sorry.
So here's the thing: is you keep coming back to the like evil terrorist guy, as a trope. And so, what do you think about because this was the other thing this reminds me of a little bit is the movie Get Out, where you have your like creeping horror villain, but then but the secret twist is that the white woman is actually the mastermind.
Again, it's a trope, and we do love to lay these things at the feet of white women who are, and the book, and the book gives her origin story, which is that she is she got this way because of patriarchy, basically, and she's just going and inflict. I mean, the fact that she's also clearly a psychopath is, neither here nor there, but
right. I think it's an interesting choice because I feel like it's trying to thread the needle between the sort of modern. There's the modern thing we've got right now, where there's kind of an acknowledgement that sexism exists, but it is paired with but the fact people fighting against white supremacy often seems to pick women as its focal point, because it is easier to fight against white supremacy when you can harness some misogyny, and not that the women aren't completely complicit in white supremacy, et cetera, but
I would not accuse this book of that in large part, because it is.
I think that this book manages not to do that. I was thinking about because I feel like one thing this book actually does fairly well is that it manages to avoid doing that, and I feel like part of how it manages to avoid doing that, because at the same time it's much harder to get away with it's much harder to pull that off when you're dealing with women who are in a much more
marginalized,
a much more sexist culture, where like there's a little bit more backup for Abigail's rage, the fact that she can't. I don't even know if she can own property at this point once she gets married. But there's a lot of things that she genuinely does not have access to. But I think, and I don't know if this is intentional on the part of the author, but one of the things I did think that this book did well is in making Abigail a psychopath villain, but also with something of a just enough of a relatable origin story. The way that they managed that the author pulls that off is I feel like her appeals to sisterhood with Fatma, which Fatma completely brushes off, but it really comes off, and this is where your idea of the slightly regressive politics of this book and your disdain for the common folk comes in, is that she's kind of right. Like, she's kind of right to see Fatma as her sort of privileged yet oppressed sister.
Yeah, but like once again, this is, I mean, I don't know how many Marvel movies you've seen, but I feel like this is like the conflict at the heart of most of them, which is the villain goes like, I, like you, believe that, we have a responsibility to, control and shape the world, and, there's so much injustice, and I'm just fighting injustice the same way that you are and doing what I must do and using violence the way that you are. And the hero goes, no, I'm not like you, even though he is like you. in a certain respect, and the hero overcomes that that shadow of darkness in himself, and it's like, no, it's okay when we do it, damn it, and then America wins.
But the thing is that I don't actually, I walked away from that going, and I know that people also walk away from Marvel movies going, no, the villain kind of had a point there. But the narrative, I feel like, did a fairly good job of setting up the ways in which Fatma and Abigail really are similar. Including just, Fatma's sort of internalized sexism is part of why it took her so long to realize that Abigail was the villain. Also, because she was just so ready to believe that this woman could be that stupid.
Right. And which we did see earlier in her initial treatment of her partner, and her partner having to, prove that she was also a capable woman, because, and there's a certain thread about butch lesbian misogyny in here that I think that neither we nor the author are competent to embark upon. But anyway,
I am totally with you that this is exactly the same thing that you get in the Marvel movies, because you're right, this book is kind of a Marvel movie in book form, or like a blockbuster in book form.
Yeah.
But I thought that it earned that a little bit more than those movies usually do. Now it lost me somewhat when, it has Fatma like pass the purity test. Because I was not completely sold that she was qualified to pass that test.
No. But then again, none of the characterization in this book is like super complicated. So it's like, for her to have, dark depths, she would have to have depths. But yeah, no, I will admit that one of the reasons that I'm being quite so harsh on this book is that it is doing the specific thing that I hate the most, which is this particular 3-act with way too long, falling action at the end structure, the movie stuff, all of the tropes, the fucking arrival of the CIS woman at the end gave me conniptions. And so on and so on. And that's partially just me, the thing that I don't like. If you don't have the same allergies to that stuff, you're going to enjoy this book a lot more than I did, which you did.
Yeah. Well, I did. Well, it helps that I haven't seen nearly as many movies as you have.
Yes. No, the fool. I think I may have done myself serious harm by watching as many Marvel movies as I did.
Yeah, I have not seen nearly as many Marvel movies as you have, and half of the ones I have seen I've watched on trans-Pacific flights when I was too loopy to really be paying attention anyway.
Can it just sort of as a random aside, I thought that her being surrounded by these, a thing that I'm like, why did they even bother is with her sort of feckless friends, Abigail's hangers on. And why make them part of the crime? Because I thought,
have the red herring of having the one time when Abigail and the bad guy show up in the same room.
I just assumed that she'd done that magically, that she
that would have also worked.
And I thought that having those twins next to her was part of the clue, because she had this duplicating twin magic golem, which was also never explained what the deal with that was. I thought that was supposed to be a clue, and it turned out not to be, but it also made it more obvious. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think her friends are all. I think that the friends exist purely to supply a variety of red herrings, including also
and a
making
variety
her look
of
dumber.
Entertaining English stereotypes as well.
Right,
I imagine.
but also they make her look. They are so dumb that having them around her makes is supposed to at least
they're part of her camouflage in both literal and metaphorical way.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
And so you the reader go, well, all of these are supposed to go, I think. Well, all these people are stupid. Clearly, none of them can be the mastermind, even though, again, Abigail shows up and you're like, oh, well, clearly, the demands of the zeitgeist say that she is going to be the villain here.
Right. But yes, no. I liked Ahmed the Crocodile God. I liked the djinns. I liked the setting. I liked all of the yet again, most of the stuff that I liked the best about this book was stuff that was lifted directly from myth, which, again, every right to do. You know, as the book points out, it's exactly what Pratchett did. My absolute favorite thing about this book is, like, the Germans being the only ones sensible enough to go and talk to their goblins, and the French and English being, like, too, you know, snooty and Protestant to go and...
Honestly, that kind of bothered me.
Oh, really?
Because... Right. Well, so maybe this is just because of some of the books that I was working on back when I was an editorial assistant. But, like, the thing is, it is true. The Germans did get really into harnessing their national myths.
Well, I mean, it's not... the book is not painting Kaiser Wilhelm as a good guy.
No, but the thing is that the book is painting this as a source of power. And
that goes back to my
problem
with the blood and soil bit in the Unbroken and this in the first place, right?
Exactly. But, like, the thing is that, okay, so part of the issue with the Unbroken is that because it wasn't drawing on real world countries, you get, like, a lot of the baggage, but you don't, you know, but you're missing a lot of the depth, right?
Right.
Part of the problem here is that when you get you're getting the depth of, like, actual countries and actual, you know, their actual mythology, but you're also getting a lot of baggage. And, you know, maybe this is just because I had to do all of the art and permissions checks for the book Dragon Slayer, which is a biography of Ludendorff, aka the guy who eventually left the Nazi party, or broke with the Nazi party. He was a World War I hero who broke with the Nazi party because he felt that they were not appreciative enough of the Germanic, like, mythocultural heritage, and also he felt that they were going too easy on the Jews.
Yes. The reason that I went so hard on the Unbroken was because I felt that all of this was implicit even there when it wasn't.
It is. Right, okay, right. But the thing is that, okay, that's all very well and good, but when you're setting up that the reason that Germany is handling the upheaval better is because they're already laying the roots of Nazism.
Yeah, but
this not going to go over well, particularly in a book that was already, you know, giving me some weird vibes, and you too.
Right. I mean, and it's like, and it tries to have its cake and eat it too by, like, making, you know, this sort of appeals to Egyptian nationalism bit that Al-Jahiz, the imposter, puts forward during his big speech, makes that sort of the villain speech. Although, again, it's the villain who has some good points speech.
Right.
Which is an appeal to, you know, sort of racist Egyptian nationalism. But then sort of cheats around that by having his Islamic viewpoint being at odds with the deeper, Ra pantheon viewpoint, which, you know, again, just shows how fucking complicated this stuff is in the real world and how you can't just, you know, go into the past and find your truth there. But the sort of the basic root of this is, like, you know, nationalistic, exceptionalist blood magic. It helps that Al-Jahiz is supposed to be Sudanese rather than Egyptian, and that there's a sort of maybe pan-Slav-esque, sort of pan-Arabian mindset where it's like the Abyssinians and the Persians and the Egyptians and the Indians are all sort of bound to a certain extent by what they hold in common culturally, but the idea is still fundamentally racist. IMO. Right.
No, I mean, I very much agree. And I think it's an interesting choice to make America. I mean, I understand. I think this is probably sort of poking fun at American isolationism and racism to have America's reaction to magic coming back be, oh no, we're not going to touch that. But
I mean, it makes sense under the circumstances because, you know, within all of these constructions, America is fundamentally soulless because we are derived from nothing in particular, and we, you know, slaughtered all of our, you know, native inhabitants in this construction again. I realize that is not actually true.
Yeah. Yeah, and so, so it makes sense for plot reasons that America did this, but of course, and so this is, I guess, what bothers me is that, actually, this was not a strength of Germany.
Yeah.
This, actually, part of why Germany lost 2 world wars is that
but they weren't interested in the Jewish science that led to the atom bomb, for example.
Well, I mean, part of why it wasn't even so much that. It's also when you kick out like a bunch of your decorated war veterans for having the wrong religion/racial background.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a good idea to exclude ideas, people, skills on racial grounds. And it's like,
right, but no, it's just also
this book knows this on one level, but it's subscribing to an ideology that contradicts that.
Well, yeah, because the thing is that actually have what is magic the metaphor here? It's for drawing on the strength of your cultural history, right?
Yes.
And the idea that this can actually lead you towards new discoveries and power. And I think it's not only just a matter of it being, sort of fundamentally racist and having some really unfortunate implications vis-a-vis Germany, but it's also that I think it's a very ahistorical view of like how cultures mix.
Yes.
And how, innovation has happened throughout history. So it's,
I mean, to sort of play the opposite hand here, I mean, the book does make a lot of, does point out over and over again how, like, for example, the 1001 Nights came from, from Persia, and a lot of was added to as it traveled through this, and
right.
Al-Jahiz is Sudanese and all this stuff. So, like, it's not, it's not claiming hard cultural boundaries or a thing, but it also
and it is and like it's acknowledging some of the complexity here when you deal with, well, okay, there's the people who want to go back to a sort of reconstructed Egyptian.
Yeah, that's what the giant ifrits are representing, is the return to that kind of nationalist fervor, I suppose.
Well, the thing is that, so you've got sort of, I mean, the idea is that you're supposed to be able to get an Egyptian nationalism that allows your Coptic Christian, that, can unite your Coptic Christians and your Muslims and your ancient Egyptian.
Just call them idolaters. It's the easiest way.
I'm not going
We've apparently reclaimed that slur, so it's okay.
You know what? I think that given my own particular religious inclinations, I'm not going to call people idolaters, even in fiction.
Good idea.
I can pull out my various Siddharim, which have all sorts of reflections on, well, nowadays, idolatry is about putting values like money over the, fundamental importance of humanity, which is a very nice way of saying that we're, going to not be rude about, say, Wicca. So
I'm just going to light my Our Lady of Czestochowa candle here after we're done to make my apologies. But
all right, you have fun with that. But so like again, basically, this book is definitely smart. It's not going for the real obvious, really dumb stuff. It's really trying to avoid that. But I do think that, despite it trying to avoid that, the idea that you can have this, honestly, also, this is another real problem with having your blood and soil magic in real world is, what do you do with the Jews?
Leave them mostly off screen, is
right.
How most of these folks have handled it.
Except for, again, I did like them. They're adorable.
They were adorable.
Your token, you're adorable.
And they were just being manipulated by Israel. I mean, the angels.
So, but it's what do you do with that? Particularly when, and that's also part of why it did feel like a bit of a dodge in Egypt, which at the time that this book is set had a lot of Jews. It no longer does. And, to say, oh, well, almost all the Jews are actually just in America, which doesn't have magic.
Yeah, interesting. That's usually the way that people try to solve that particular problem.
That's also where all the Roma are, apparently. Again, according to that sort of one. Oh, I was in New York where there's Jews and Roma and all sorts of exotic people.
Mother of God. It's depressing. So, like, to go around to where I started this book, as long as you just turn your brain off and read the book, you'll probably have an okay time. But if you start thinking about these implications or pick at the threads of the plot, you're going to have a less okay time. So the less you think, the better a time you're going to have with this one. And that's sort of where I would come down on it at the end, since we're getting close to the end of our discussion here.
Yep. I think 100%. If you want a fun little action movie, or fun big really action movie of a book, this is great, but it's definitely one that does not reward in-depth study.
Yes. And I'm still not as angry with it as I was with Unconquerable Sun, which has similar...
You really hated that one.
Which has similar problems, just because this one is also much less ambitious and much less pretentious than Unconquerable Sun, and I respect that. All right. Next week, at long last, we've been kicking this one down the road forever, but our next episode will be a retro episode about some cyberpunk lesbians called Trouble and Her Friends.
Yes. Yeah, we've been kicking this one down for like 15, 16 episodes.
Yeah, not because we're dreading it, because it's bad. We like this one. At least I seem to remember liking it. It's just that,
Yeah. But there's
other
just
things
always
have come
something
up.
Slightly more pressing.
But this time, gosh darn it, we're going to give Trouble her due and have a retro episode, which we haven't done in a minute.
Hopefully it holds up, because it's been a while since either of us.
I'm actually really looking forward to seeing if reading it with the Wizards versus Lesbians lens I've developed, which, I read this way before we started this podcast, whether it is actually a Wizards versus Lesbians book or not, and we'll find out.
Yeah. I look forward to rereading it and finding out.
All right. Until then.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.